Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So in this video I'd like to talk about the Lostmauth set and how good it actually is. Is it actually worth running it with the reduced item level? Well, let's find out. So here we have the Lostmauth set, and with it we can see with the tooltip, it says there when you have 3 of set, you will do an additional hit for 100 magnitude on a critical hit. Now this seems really insane, right? 100 extra magnitude? We go to our powers and we look, let's say we're to use Oath Strike, and we were to use it on, let's say, 10 enemies in front of us, then each hit would deal a 25 magnitude based on my Oath Strike, and then depending on whether I crit or not, if we have a 90% crit chance here, we will hit on at least 9 of those 10 guys, and we will deal an extra 100 magnitude damage on the guys we crit on, meaning we would deal 125 magnitude just on one at-will strike. And without the Lostmauth set having an internal cooldown or anything, that means I would be able to get 125 magnitude on most of my at-will strikes on as many enemies that I have in front of me to be able to hit. Now this is insane. So stacking this with a high crit chance makes the Lostmauth set really good for AoE, but is it actually as good as it says? Does it actually deal 100 extra magnitude? Magnitude powers are generally, you would multiply this magnitude by whatever modifiers to your damage you would get from these offensive statistics along with your damage. And is this the case for the Lostmauth? Well, we shall see. Now looking at the Storyteller's Journal, we all know that when you have also a set of 3, you will do an additional hit, but this says for weapon damage on a critical hit, not 100 magnitude. Now, which one is right? Are they different? We shall see. So when I go and I jump over to a dummy, and I go and strike the dummy, there I was unfortunate enough not to actually crit, but on my second hit I crit, and we got our Lostmauth set to proc. You can see there I did my original hit for Oath Strike, having a crit there, and then it procced my Vorpal weapon enchant, and then also 2 Lostmauth's Vengeances, 1 from the books and 1 from the set. And you can see they're doing the exact same amount of damage. And you can see the base damage here, 5,244, is exactly equal to my base damage here, 5,244, meaning the Lostmauth set, its tooltip, is very misleading by saying magnitude damage. It should just say weapon damage, or it should just say damage, like the actual Storyteller journals say. So the Storyteller journals are correct, and basically there was nothing changed to the Lostmauth set other than the tooltip just visually changing. The mechanics are still exactly the same, but does it still make it really good to run? Because every time I hit with my at-will, you can see I'm dealing a considerable amount more damage. You can see there, my actual base hit of Oath Strike is 2,738 on a crit, and I also believe that was a deflect. When I don't deflect with my Oath Strike, we can see it will deal up to nearly 4,000 damage. So adding up these Lostmauths, and you can also see the Lostmauth sets, those procs can also deflect, but they can't crit. You can see this one was a 3,496 and the other one was 2,468. The first one wasn't a deflect and the second one was a deflect. But even with them deflecting, they literally more than double the amount of damage you do with, let's say, our at-will Oath Strike, which is AoE, where we can hit multiple enemies, as we can see by jumping over to these 2 dummies here. I'm going to go and put a dot in the chat there so that breaks it up, and we can strike both these dummies if I position myself properly. There we hit both of them, and with hitting both of them, you can see if we scroll up a bit, this is where my dot, and I did 1 strike with Oath Strike. The first strike's there, and the second one's there, and both of them crit, and then we got our Lostmauth sets proccing here, along with Tales of the Artifact proccing, along with the Tenebrous proccing. And this is insane, and this is with 1 strike, and you to think I can do this 3 times in a second just by swinging my at-will like this. It's pretty nuts how much damage you can rack up pretty quickly just by having the Lostmauth set. For example, if I go and activate my combat log so it will record it, and then I use this advanced combat tracker to actually record what I'm doing within combat, we can see, let's say over a minute, how much damage will my Lostmauth set do compared to, let's say, my at-will strikes. So there we can see over the course of a minute, I've dealt over 2 million damage just with 2 targets and with my AoE at will. And yes, our Lostmauth Vengeance was nearly dealing twice the amount of damage as just my at will. Now, this I have to specify is with 2 Lostmauth sets basically. So I have the actual set itself and then with the books. Meaning if you're on a paladin and you have the Lostmauth set, just one of them, it will do about as much damage as your Oath Strike will. And then we have of course our other procs. But this is excluding our encounter powers, our big hits. Is it still worth it to run it if you're using those big hits? Well, if you want to just go and one-shot mobs real quick, like I could use my Bane, and if both of them crit, I'm also proccing my Lostmauth Vengeance on those Bane hits as well, meaning it's all instantaneous damage basically. So you will deal that much damage and then those Lostmauth ones will also proc at the same time, meaning you deal that bit more damage. Whereas if you have a set bonus which has like this Dark Remnant set, which will give you 2.5% extra damage and then up to 5% against your Devil's Fiends and whatever in hell, you would deal, let's say, 5% more damage max there, and pretty much from any set as well, unless you're using something particular that would give you more damage based on when you cast a daily power, let's say like the Inherent Danger set, but you'd have to be behind the enemy then for that to actually give you extra damage. So is this set good to run in terms of that, and does it make it better? Well, for an AoE environment where you deal lots of damage in large areas to multiple targets, yes, the Lostmauth set is really good, especially when you're using an AoE at will. If your class doesn't really have an AoE at will, it might not be so great to run. But if you run something in AoE like not a Vorpal, if you were to run a lightning enchantment, does the actual Lostmauth set proc on those extra lightning arcs? Well, we go and we strike, let's say, just one dummy, and we can see it will arc over and it'll deal damage to the dummy, and the Lostmauth set won't proc on that, as we can see there. But that aside, yes, the Lostmauth set is really good to run when you have multiple targets. As for, is it the best to run when you're in a boss fight? No, generally some other set when you cast a daily power and deal considerable amount more damage is better, especially when you're stacking like artifacts to get even more debuffs and deal more extra damage. But it's not a bad set to continually run through pretty much all content, as that extra hit is pretty reliable and it doesn't cause you to, let's say, stand still like the Mad Mage set to gain extra damage, or like Dark Remnant set to be actual fighting particular enemies to get up to 5%, or let's say like the Demon Lord set where you can get up to 10% depending on how much hit points the enemies have. If you just want to one-shot enemies from full HP to 0, then you're definitely better off with something like the Lostmauth set, which will do that extra hit. Now, of course, this Lostmauth set and how good it is will depend on your build and how much base damage you have. But regardless of that, everything is dependent on your base damage anyway. So depending on how much base damage you have, it will still, the ratio will be there. Of course, you do take a hit to your item level. You take a total hit of 960 there. Now, for a tank like myself without an extra base damage bonus, this is yes an equivalent of 96 base damage, which is about 600 damage hit on a 100 magnitude attack. And for a DPS, that's about a 750 damage hit. That is if you have all of these offense stats maxed out. Now, 100 magnitude, like the Lostmauth set, would actually be the equivalent of, let's say, 4 of these Oath strikes, right? So on a critical hit with my Oath Strike without it deflecting is the equivalent of just over 15,000 extra damage. Imagine the Lostmauth set actually did what it said the tooltip said. That would be insane and would by far make this set the best out there, just by having that much damage on a critical hit. That's like if you have 90% critical chance that is basically adding 100 magnitude to your powers. But that aside, the last thing I want to show you is something weird. We actually have an exchange for the Lostmauth set, but weirdly enough, it's only for some people, and it seems to only be for those people who've made accounts quite long ago. So I jump onto my cleric here, and I made this character in 2015, and with that I can go and look at the Antiquities Scholar, and looking in her store, she gives me the option to trade in Lostmauth set items. You can see I can trade in the artifact here, the neck, and the waist. Now I've already traded in one of the waist items, and you get this pack. You get these exchange packs where you can go and switch out that set for any of the other following. These sets here, you can get the Valindra set, you can get the Tiamat set, you can get the Seldarin set, you can get the Lathander set, you can get the Imperial set, or you can get the Black Ice set. Now, the Tiamat set, they're being pretty good for healers. As for the other sets, they don't really seem to have much effect whatsoever. Sure, you might want to run the Seldarin set if you're, let's say, a tank. But really, that's about it. Anyway, with that being said, that's just something interesting that's there, and I'm not sure why it's there at all. Perhaps they're planning to remove the Lostmauth set entirely from the game or not. It's a bit shocking and a bit drastic. I don't know. But with that being said, hopefully this was at least somewhat informative. And if it was, consider leaving the video a like. And if you're new around here, consider subscribing. And we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.